Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Side Projects. This one is all about, well, I love the TV show Homeland, and they had this whole season kind of set in this building. I didn't realize it was a real place. Apparently it is, the Tower of David in Caracas, so let's jump in. When it comes to wealth, human cities have always been places of extremes. The rich are extremely rich and the poor are often extremely poor. Interestingly enough, this divide has often been illustrated based on height. Rich people at the top of tall skyscrapers in their expensive condos with amazing views, poor people stalking the dirty, dangerous streets down below. Of course, the reality is more complex than that. The more expensive apartments actually tend to be near the bottom of the buildings, yet it serves as a useful literary symbol of poverty in urban environments. But once there was a place that defied this idea. In Caracas, Venezuela, there was a time when the poorest members of society were situated at the top of a skyscraper, or skyscraper, as we shall see. In 1990, a tower began being constructed in downtown Caracas, capital of Venezuela. It was named Centro Financiero con Finanzas, which translates to Financial Center con Finanzas, and I apologize for my Spanish pronunciation there. Informally, though, the structure was called the Tower of David, named after its main investor, David Brillemborg, a Venezuelan tycoon. The building itself is actually a complex of 6 structures: the lobby and conference room, 2 towers A and B, and buildings K and Z, and a 12-floor parking garage. By all accounts, this tower was intended to be a glorious display of material wealth, meant to serve the world of high business. Tower A even had a helipad on it to allow important individuals to skip any downtown traffic. Brillemborg envisioned the tower as the headquarters for his bank, but as you probably guessed by the title of this video, that is not what happened. David Brillemborg didn't live to see his tower completed, as he died in 1993. A year later, Venezuela was hit by a massive banking crisis. 17 of 49 commercial banks in Venezuela failed, accounting for about 53% of assets in the Venezuelan financial system. In a prelude to what would come later, the Venezuelan government took control of the failing banks as well as the unfinished tower. After the banking crisis, work never resumed on construction, and it has remained in its half-finished state ever since. In 1998, 4 years after the government took over the structure, a man by the name of Hugo Chavez was elected president of the country, and he began implementing a series of populist economic reforms, often referred to as being a bit socialist. One of these policies involved expropriation, also known as nationalization of privately owned land. Now, nationalization terrifies businesses, and this policy had the knock-on effect of causing all private home construction in Venezuela to stop virtually overnight, leaving the government with the task of building houses for its residents. Chavez didn't mind this. In fact, it was partly what he wanted. Unfortunately, the government couldn't build houses fast enough, and soon Venezuela was in the grips of a full-blown housing shortage. In response to this, residents who needed a place to live began to turn towards an unlikely place: the half-built Tower of David. At first, living in an unfinished skyscraper seems a bit like madness. The tower was a skeleton of a functioning structure. It had no electricity, no running water, and it was full of garbage and rubble, and most importantly, it had no safety precautions whatsoever. Some staircases were simply freestanding with no walls or guardrails, a problem shared by many of the balconies. This place was a safety inspector's nightmare. Humans, however, are adaptable, and they made this place their home just like any other. Of the 45 floors on the tower, 28 were inhabited, and the population of the tower varied over the years from 2,000 people all the way up to 5,000. These were not barren lives like one might expect. These were people who worked in the surrounding neighborhoods, brought their kids to the ground floor to make sure they caught the school bus, and everything else you'd expect from someone who's not living in an unfinished skyscraper. Some of the residents living in the tower were educated professionals or civil servants, well-off individuals who nevertheless made their home here. The tower even had its own businesses, locally run by its residents. There were grocery stores, beauty salons, and even an unlicensed dentist. Residents improved the utilities, finding ways to get electricity to some parts of the tower. They beautified the residents, turning hovels into homes. Some better-off residents managed to completely renovate their rooms in the tower and turn them into what were practically luxury apartments: jacuzzis, marble tops, even walls, and fresh paint. Some residents owned cars, which they kept in the conveniently located 12th-floor parking garage. Even the organization of the tower was beyond what one might expect. Living in the tower required families to follow rules. These were your standard neighborhood ordinances, like keeping the area clean, noise regulations, etc. Each inhabited floor had an individual in charge of it with the responsibility of ensuring that all residents behaved. There was an informal property tax that went to the heads of the community, who would then put the money back into improving the tower, buying anything that was needed, paying cleaners, and other things. One resident remarked in a documentary, "I think this tower is better organized than the country." The person had a point. The residents of the Tower of David took something industrial and ugly and made it something resembling a neighborhood. They even had leaders and representatives that they used to negotiate with companies and government organizations on behalf of the entire community, including when the government invariably ordered them to move out. For obvious reasons, the Venezuelan government was uneasy with thousands of people living in an unfinished building with little safety regulations. They also, however, acknowledged that the residents of the community had built lives in the tower and had invested a great deal of personal effort and resources into making it a better place for everyone to live. With that in mind, and after negotiations with community leaders, the government announced in 2014 that it would create new housing for all of the residents in Cuar, a city 1 hour south of Caracas. Though many were sad that they would be saying goodbye to the place they'd made their lives in, they all understood that they wouldn't have been able to stay there forever, and that ultimately it really was unsafe. The moving out took place 3 floors at a time until, in June 2015, the last residents left and the Tower of David was empty once again. Since its residents were forced to vacate it, the tower has remained in its unfinished state, and its future is uncertain. There was a brief period when it seemed like a Chinese bank might be interested in buying the tower and completing it for its original use, but that fell through in 2016. The Venezuelan government has been in a self-inflicted economic and political crisis for the last few years, and as such is in no position to address the issue at the moment. As a final nail in the coffin, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck Caracas in August 2018, causing the top 5 floors of the tower to tilt a full 25 degrees off axis. It seems that moving the residents out was a prescient move. Though it remains empty and will likely collapse or be demolished at some point, the fond memories will at least remain unblemished by catastrophe. And though it may still be named after the tycoon who first began building it, the legacy of the Tower of David will, in a way, always belong to the people who built something else with it. And so I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, smash that like button below. Also, if you've got a suggestion for a future side projects video, please do leave it in the comments below. I do make a lot of these videos from your suggestions, so please do that. And as always, thank you for watching.